Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. My name is Jasper Dent. I'm the event coordinator here at McNally Robinson Booksellers in Saskatoon. This event is being held on Treaty 6 territory. This is the land of the Cree, Dene, Saulteaux, Dakota, Nakota, and Lakota, and homeland of the Métis. It's my pleasure to welcome you all tonight to the joint Saskatoon launch of The Beech Forest by Marlis Wesseler and The Rasmussen Papers by Connie Gault, both published by THISTLEDOWN Press. Thank you so much to Connie and Marlis for being here tonight, and to THISTLEDOWN for working with us to create this event and make it happen. I just have a few quick notes before we begin here. First of all, this event is being live streamed, so please just be aware of and mindful of the web camera up to the front right here. I'd also like to take this moment to remind you all to silence your cell phones if you haven't already. It's the paranoia. As soon as I say it, you start second guessing yourself. All right, now that we've done that, I'd like to invite the editorial director of THISTLEDOWN Press, Elizabeth Phillips, up to the microphone to start us off this evening. Everyone, please give her a very warm welcome.
Welcome, everybody. It's nice to see this crowd out here for our fabulous Saskatchewan writers. I used to refer to them as the fabulous Saskatchewan Regina writers, but Connie laughed. Defected. So we're going to start off with Marlis Wesseler. Marlis was born in Kinistino. Attended university in Saskatoon and Regina, taught school in the north, traveled extensively, and has lived and worked in Regina for over 40 years. The Beech Forest is her sixth book of fiction, award-winning and often nominated. Her previous books include the short story collections Life Skills and Imitating Art, and the novels Elvis Unplugged, South of the Border, and The Last Chance Ladies Book Club, all of which I recommend. What I like about Marlis, well, I know a few things about Marlis. She can sing, like years ago we were at some crazy Writers Guild thing, and she knew Marlis could sing. Anyway, she can write too. Come on up.
Yes, I'm not gonna sing.
Yeah, come on.
Thank you to McNally Robinson for hosting one of my readings yet again, and of course, thank you to THISTLEDOWN, my publisher, and thank you all for coming. I'm reading a piece from the second chapter of the novel, where my main character, while visiting in-laws in Germany, goes into Berlin on her own to see a Max Ernst exhibit and to find her favorite of his sculptures, a piece called Lunar Asparagus. She picks up a pamphlet in the gallery foyer and is delighted to read Lunar Asparagus 1935 on the list of exhibits. She smiles broadly at the museum worker guarding the entrance, who, after a tired double take, slightly modifies his scowl. She wanders through the various decades of Ernst's work, past dream landscapes of sinister forests, desert hoodoos, lush dally-like interiors, past the beach scenes featuring silver gray buttocks she thinks of as his buns of steel paintings, and finds the painted bronze figure, rather dimly lit, set up on a stand in the corner of the room. The nameplate says lunar asparagus, but it isn't the one from the Museum of Modern Art, where she saw it the first time. From the base of this statue grows two stalks, not just the one. Both heads have surreal, spacey expressions. And worse, the face she clearly recalls and thought she wanted has lost its joyous goofiness. It has something of a mouth, and the mouth is sort of grinning, but it isn't the same. How could her memory be so faulty? Well, it can't be, she decides. Her lone asparagus must still be there, sitting by itself in the MoMA, waiting for her to visit New York City again. It must be part of a series of lunar asparagus. She drifts distractedly through the remainder of the Ernst exhibit and outside into a gray fall day, onto a giant gray cement patio, past stone and steel and cement statues, down to the sidewalk, and walks a block or so to the stone and cement-sided Gemälde gallery. Inside, she feels disoriented, overwhelmed by the vast central hall's blonde hardwood parquet, its golden pathways leading to rooms of priceless treasures. She walks through the labyrinth of nationalities and centuries, almost entirely alone with the old masters, except for the museum guards, who, taking their job seriously, keep a wary eye on her from one room to the next. A jaded lethargy begins to slow her down long before she finds the Italian Renaissance she is looking for. The image she will take away with her this time is from one of the 16th century Flemish still lifes of overripe fruit beside dead pheasants or hares. The sparkle of crystal glasses, the dark shine of cherries, the finely delineated fuzz on the peaches, the green glow of grapes, the flaccid, absolute deadness of the game. How can the vibrancy of these colors, the quality of this painted light have lasted through all these centuries? Outside again in the late afternoon, continuing to stroll aimlessly, she grabs a snack at a currywurst stand and realizes she isn't sure anymore where she can catch a bus back to the train station. The map Renata had offered her was too big to fit in her purse, so she said she would find one at the station. She didn't. She simply followed some German tourists who she knew from their conversation were on their way to the same gallery as she was, off the train and onto the right bus. She can't ask the snack vendor for directions. He is now ignoring her completely and mumbling under his breath because he doesn't understand her accent. She glances at his sullen face, his misshapen woolen sweater, and is happy enough just to walk away with her hot dog without being yelled at. She knows Gerhard, her husband, has little confidence she will manage to make it here and back on her own, and will be standing by with his cell phone ready to borrow his father's car to come and pick her up, or to arrange for his sister to do so from work. When he put her on the train heading toward the city, he said gloomily, half teasing, that he could only hope for the best. Unlike you, she told him, I'm not allergic to asking directions. Right now, however, the Berliners tramping past in their anoraks and walking shoes or stodgy business attire do not look inviting enough to accost with questions. The bus stop is around here somewhere. She could take a cab to the train station if worst comes to worst. She doesn't want to risk trying the subway. She can picture herself missing the terminal where she's supposed to transfer, condemning herself to hours of subterranean purgatory. A half hour later, there are no cabs in sight, and she is totally lost. Why, when she wanted to get lost yesterday in the woods and couldn't, would she lose her sense of direction so entirely in the city? She is sadly familiar with this situation, but it always weighs heavily, providing a distant sense of self-disdain, as if part of her were some relative giving a lecture, as if part of her were Gerhard. She knows she's turned several wrong ways and now finds herself in a small cobblestone plaza, frequented mainly by people walking right through, people who undoubtedly know where they are going. Surrounded by empty benches, a young man painted all in silver is pretending to be a statue for a couple of teenagers and 3 pigeons, all eyeing him speculatively. She decides against asking anything of the unisex teenagers who, in spite of sporty-looking running shoes and jackets, wear green mohawks. Neither fish nor fowl, as her Aunt Gemma would say. She stands there pretending to examine her cell phone until they saunter off. The pigeons lose interest too, migrating to a garden plot off to the side, and she is left alone to study the statue for signs of life. She looks in her purse for euros. What would be appropriate? Can you tell me how to get to the bus stop for the Ostbahnhof? She asks in German. He doesn't move. She rustles a €5 note, half out of her wallet. For €10, I will help walking you there, he says in English. Oh, you don't need to do that, she says without conviction. Just give me good directions. I'm finishing for today. This is not the season. No one is stopping. It was a stupid idea. €10 is too much, but she gives him the money. He gathers up the few coins he'd managed to collect and leads her out of the plaza, going the opposite way she would have turned if she'd been by herself. I have no sense of direction whatsoever, she says glumly, attempting conversation. A handsome man in a perfectly tailored gray suit passes by, giving them a wide berth. Many women don't, he says. She feels she should defend her sex somehow from her own failings, but doesn't comment. She remembers Gerhardt and their neighbor Robbie laughing when the province was forced to hire a certain percentage of women to fight forest fires. The men complained they would spend more time looking for lost women than fighting fires. That paint must get uncomfortable, she says. And standing all day without moving, I don't know how you do it. I only did come for 2 hours or so here, he says. The season is past, but I needed money. His plastic armor squeaks as he moves, while his bare arms, legs, and face covered in grease paint and a kind of sparkly powder shed tiny glints. His chin is cleft with a Kirk Douglas dimple. Are you an actor? She asks. Yes. He glances at her with a flicker of energy. I am searching always for new roles. She wonders if this means he is actively involved in a theater, or if he is always unemployed and looking for work, or if he simply looks on life as a stage. If he takes the bus or subway home, shedding flecks all the way. If he has a wife or a roommate who paints him, or if there is a street performers guild of some kind where he goes to become gilded hub, where he has a locker for his clothes and somebody to hose him off. But her powers of conversation flag along with her curiosity. People look at them with amusement or irritation or with nothing, a nanosecond of a bored flicker. He points out a bus stop across a wide boulevard. This isn't the one she remembers, but he tells her what number to take. They shake hands goodbye, and when she is finally seated on the bus, having first double-checked with the driver, she notices silver embedded in the lifeline of her palm. The train is crowded at the end of the day, and she has to sit the wrong way, facing a man reading a newspaper with the giant headlines of Berliner Morgenpost. She wishes she had something to read. She can't get over a slight queasiness when she looks out the window only to see scenery she's already passed. The outskirts of the city meld with farmers' fields that are almost as flat and featureless as those in Saskatchewan. She closes her eyes and thinks of the art galleries, of the still life paintings showing the brevity of existence, and about her asparagus that wasn't there. Thank you.
Thank you, Marlis. It's a lot of fun. She's almost as funny as I am. In a different way. Connie Gault has written for stage and radio and film. Is this a trilogy?
Is this a trilogy?
Yeah, these 3 novels. You've written 3 novels, right? Euphoria,
Yes.
Beauty, and now Rasmussen's Papers. Not a trilogy, just 3 novels.
It just happened to be.
Just happened to be 3 novels. Okay.
I have a fourth that you're on the publish.
Okay. Talk to me later. Beauty won the 2016 Saskatchewan Book of the Year, as well as the award for fiction, and was longlisted for the Scotia Giller Prize. A former prose editor of Grain, Connie has also edited books of fiction and has taught many creative writing classes and mentored emerging writers. And as we mentioned earlier, she has defected to London, Ontario. Alas. And she's written short stories too. Really great short stories. Just about everything. Come on up.
Thank you so much for coming tonight. Thank you, Liz, for that introduction, and thanks to Marianne Rasmussen for having us tonight. And thanks to THISTLEDOWN Press for publishing my novel, and especially for letting it come out at the same time as Marlis's, so we could do this launching together. Marlis and I have known each other since, I'm going to say 1980, and if I'm wrong, she'll correct me. Was it 79? And since we, oh, by the way, she's got a bit of, that narrator has a bit of Marlis in her, or the main character, I mean, of Marlis's novel. You may recall, she got lost, and Marlis and I met. We were both lost. We discovered that we were lost, and shortly after that, we discovered we were both writing. So first time kind of early writers. And we've been friends, and we've been exchanging our work ever since. So I think that's a long time. I want to especially thank I was going to say McNally Robinson. No, I want to thank THISTLEDOWN Press a little bit more tonight, because it's a small independent Canadian press. And I just recently read in the Globe and Mail that less than 5% of the books sold in this country are sold by Canadian publishers. So let's keep them going. Now, that article in the Globe and Mail also said, by the way, that this could be the worst year ever in this country to publish a book. But it's always been doom and gloom. The novel is always dying over and over. And so I started, this is a book kind of about writing, in a way. And I started out this book with a quote from Henry James, which is, if you write books, don't you sell them? Do you mean, don't people buy them? A little, not so much as I could wish. Writing books, unless one be a great genius, and even then, is the last road to fortune. I think there is no more money to be made by literature. 1888. So just so you know, that has always been. I want to read a couple of little bits from the novel. The Aspern Papers by Henry James is a story of a male editor who invades the house of two women. One of them is an older woman who used to be the lover of a poet, and he wants to write the biography of the poet, so he needs the papers. So I read the Aspern Papers, and I decided it would be a lot of fun to write it upside down with a woman narrator who invades a house owned by two men. And because she wants to write the biography of her favorite poet, Marianne Rasmussen. So it's set, by the way, in Toronto, Cabbagetown. It's sort of more or less contemporary. Of all the ways to look at the world, the lens of paranoia is one that comes easily to me. Stories of bad service are always ready on my lips. Waiters in restaurants, clerks in stores, I often suspect they've conspired to obstruct me. They don't want me in their establishments and won't tell me why, and they exchange glances when I complain. I've been ignored in the deli and left without buying the cheese I'd wanted. In a twee shop, I was treated disdainfully in exchange for the opportunity to leave with 3 lemon tarts. I was wending my way through a small neighborhood park, feeling that everyone was against me, when I looked a little further than my navel and saw that the sky was crammed full of bulbous white clouds that looked like breasts. It was so unusual, I took some pictures. There were hundreds of them hanging down, luminous, full, and pillowy. Who did I have to share this with? I was sorry that the first person I thought of was my ex. I could only conclude that I had my own traitor living inside me, or I would never think of him again. Before I put my phone away, I was assaulted by a sprinkler. Water meant for the already lush grass sprayed the walkway and me. I went home, wet and angry, sure that some park worker had set the sprinkler deliberately askew on purpose to ruin not just my day, but everyone else's too. Write about it, Harry advised. I didn't explain that suspicion of waiters and clerks and gardeners was not really the biggest subject occupying the back of my mind, and that the anxiety that had set off my paranoia was about men. One of them him. Was he on my side, or was he on Aubrey's? I was almost sure he sympathized with me, but did Aubrey have a hold of some kind over him? Even after our evening out, which had brought us closer, I still wondered if I could trust him. Also on my mind was the problem of whether or not I should reveal that I wasn't entirely trustworthy myself. And the next little bit I'd like to read is a conversation between the narrator and her, the older brother in the house. Aubrey Ash is his name. He's a can-lit, once famous can-lit writer of 1,000 copy books. And and he was once the lover of Marianne Rasmussen. And he owns the papers that she wants to get hold of in order to write this biography. Oh, and by the way, he's 100 years old. So I think he's a super ager because he's quite able to keep up his part of the conversation. It's intellectual love Iris Murdoch was talking about, Aubrey grumbled one day. Like George Eliot, I said, with the reverence I could not help feeling and conveying when I said the name. It's a kind of love that sees humble people as significant in the great pattern. Shit, he said. Humble people, great pattern, there's neither. People are not humble, they're not great. All people are animals, that's all they are. There's no pattern, big or small, altruistic or mean. Don't parrot the inanities of the ancients. Christ, woman, grow up. This wasn't the first time a man had told me to grow up. I realized that I had a certain youthfulness that I maybe couldn't keep down. But I didn't think I was immature. Maybe I was more in tune with myself than most. I felt like the same person who had read the Bobbsey twins. I didn't believe I'd shed my previous iterations like dead skin as we're constantly being told we do. I could find my 6-year-old within me anytime I looked for her. None of this was any of Aubrey's business, but I couldn't let him get away with talking about George Eliot that way. But it's the language that's old-fashioned, I said, not the thought. Eliot wanted to expand thinking, get people to sympathize with those different from themselves. Isn't that what fiction should do, get us out of ourselves? I had been staring into space, delivering my defense of George Eliot as if she hovered nearby in a snit, requiring my support. When I looked at Aubrey again, he was shaking alarmingly, so alarmingly I was afraid he might explode or have a heart attack in front of me. I half stood thinking I should call Harry. Don't, he said, wait. He sank back, gasping, his hand flailing and grabbing at the air near his throat until he'd slowed his breathing. Then he said the most surprising thing ever to come out of him in my hearing. Surprising because it was completely without rancor. There's little worth remembering your whole life long, but once in a while, someone gets a few words right. I waited to see who had got a few words right. I thought of George Eliot's candle flickering like the little ego of each of us that wants to be, demands to be the center of things. She had got that right. But I knew he wasn't talking about George Eliot, and for once he wasn't talking about himself. Yes, Marianne Rasmussen. He shook his head. He didn't say the lines out loud, and I didn't press him. I could have named any number of lines or whole poems that qualified, yet there was one bit that floated into my mind and stayed there while we sat quietly under the small high window, one each side of the book-laden table, in a truce of sorts. It wasn't anything profound. It did not get me out of myself and into sympathy with others. It was personal, I suppose, which is surprising since I couldn't remember it exactly, hadn't ever memorized it, so I couldn't be sure I had the words right. But its meaning, I got that. And I am strangled, my own hands at my open throat. It sounds as if it would belong to the flesh poems, but it was written before them, before whatever happened that changed her and her poetry. It made me remember my dream about the gravestone with my name on it. Was I strangling myself by being here in this house belonging to these men? One thing was sure, I wasn't getting any writing done. I wasn't writing any masterpieces down in that garden. So, thank you. That's a little taste for the book.
So are you guys going to come up here and maybe answer some questions if anybody has any questions? You can sit in those chairs if you want. There's another microphone here. Maybe no one has a question, she said, hopefully. Go sit there anyway, they're nice chairs.
Oh my goodness. It's out of the way so people can see you.
No, know, you all have to ask something else.
Fine with me if nobody has any questions.
I'll ask something. I know something about these books.
Yes.
So I noticed that in both the little bits you read, there were people inside the narrator's head. Mara says it was some stern relative, kind of chastising her, and Connie's, was it the voice of paranoia? What was it? Paranoia?
It's the lens.
Yes, yes, yes. So can you say something about this doubleness? I just made that up.
That's pretty good. Boy, oh boy, that's a hard one. You go ahead.
I think most people have voices in their heads. You think of something your mother told you when you were a teenager, or something that you keep doing over and over again that exasperates a husband or a kid, or and when you're by yourself doing things that maybe are typical of you, like me being lost, which is exactly the same as Lisa. You think of these voices. I don't. Well, anyway, I'm not very articulate about this, but go ahead, you say something.
It's in your head. Yeah. Mostly it's me talking to myself, you know. It's like, Connie, it's a, oh, Connie, why did you do that? Or that was so stupid, Connie. So I think I have my own built-in person. Maybe took the place of my mother, though. That happens. Yeah, and as far as paranoia, well, I mean, I'm not anything like my narrator in this novel, because she's not a very upright person, and she does bad things. She lies and tries to steal and all kinds of things like that I would never do, and manipulate people. But it was a lot of fun writing her. It's really fun trying, just, you know, taking on somebody who's doesn't mind crossing those kind of barriers we set up for ourselves usually. So that was really good.
Yeah, there's a lot of double crossing.
Yeah. Yes.
Yes.
Connie, can I ask you about your relationship with Henry James?
Well, you know, I'm a big fan of Henry James, and I haven't read all his later novels. Once he started to dictate them, I believe they got so verbose that they're, you know, I think it would, you have to be a dedicated
I agree.
fan. But all the earlier novels, I just loved his novels so much. But I had never read the Aspern Papers. So when I read it recently, or well, like a few years ago, it's a really good book too. Of course, all his writing is good, but I didn't really like how he treated women in that particular book. I thought he kind of set up the younger woman to be pitied. And so I kind of imagined this narrator being something like her in a way, in that she is kind of a timid but determined woman, and how she gets led astray into, you know, all this kind of subterfuge that his narrator does in the Aspern Papers. So, you know, and I also thought it would be really fun to learn how to use plot, because he uses plot so elegantly and talks about plot so elegantly. So it was really fun. Of course, I kind of got carried away and added a bunch of twists of my own. Once you start plotting things, it's fun, I find.
Catherine?
Yeah. Oh, let's try to get up.
I just have one comment to make and then a question for both of you. So my comment's kind of ridiculous because I laughed out loud, Connie, when I read the first line of this novel. My friend had done something different with her eyebrows the day we met for lunch, and it was making me pay more attention than usual to her face. And I laughed because I don't for the life of me understand what on earth is going on in the world of eyebrows. I'm always being sidetracked by somebody's eyebrows. So anyway, you nailed it. But the more serious thing that occurred to me as I listened to you both was the amount of research that you've clearly undertaken to write these novels. I'm just wondering if you would both speak to the type and the approach with regard to that, please. An easier question than Liz's, I think.
Well, in spite of the rather light piece I read, there's my book is partly about the Holocaust and German guilt, and I was married to a German man for 47 years and knew his relatives and background and was always interested in the Holocaust and their reactions to it. And when I thought of this book, I have never met a Holocaust survivor. This character in my novel is entirely fictional. But over all my years of reading, he came together. And I think he's one of the strong characters in he comes across as fairly believable, if I could say so myself. But he's entirely fictional, but a result of all my years of reading what happened and trying to understand something about how it could possibly have come about. So that's.
Yeah, I can say, add to that from reading early drafts of the Beech Forest and loving it from the start and knowing how much work Marlis was doing, the in-depth research and worrying how that was affecting her too, because this is a heavy subject and frightening. Yeah, that went on for a few years. Yeah. That's So in my case, I keep trying not to. In my case, my research was much lighter and mostly fun. Reading the Aspern Papers a few times, doing some research into CanLit in the 60s. Was there anything else I did? I don't know. I wrote this for a lark, this novel. I just did not think I would ever publish it. I just thought it would be fun to try writing it. And I just wrote a fast first draft. And then I got more serious about it after I finished the first draft. And I really wrote it in a way to amuse Joan Givner, an old English professor of mine, because I thought she'd get a kick out of it, me taking on Henry James. I mean, let's face it. So yeah, that I guess really just trying to the real fun research was being inside a mind like Henry James for a short time, and just that ability to create characters and set them in motion and let them go, but only so far. Because usually in my other writing, I kind of let characters just go wherever they want, but this sometimes I had to rein them in to try and fit within his story, which was fun to do. and freeing, you know. I didn't have to do that kind of thinking as much.
I have a question for Marlis. I too am very interested in German history. Sure, that's some time over there. You say you've been hearing reactions from Germans, including your husband, to the Holocaust and how they tried to explain it. How long did it take you from the beginnings of these conversations to realize that you had a novel in you that you could write?
I don't think any of the reading or discussions or research I did was towards a novel. All for years, it was just my own questions about how this could have come about, and I wanted answers. And then, but what kind of I originally thought of this a story that could go that I could turn into a novel, and I thought at first that I would have my main character have an affair with a Jewish man, and then become rather obsessed with the Holocaust, and then meet the older man, the survivor, through her own initiative, and that I had this idea that she would have an affair with a Jewish carpenter, and this piqued my interest so that it made me want to write a novel. And then after several drafts, several versions, and comments from my most trusted readers, I realized I can't make the affair work at all. So I just cut him out. I mean, he's gone. And what was left was the kernel of a I think a simple story well told. That's what I wanted. So that's what I've got here. But as I said, I didn't start researching the Holocaust with a novel in mind.
I have a question for Connie. So you've written for is it song?
Yes.
For the stage and film and short stories and novels, but no poetry as far as we know. But this is about poetry. Can you talk about that?
Yes, only poetry defeats me.
Defeats me too.
Yeah, well, I think poetry's the hardest thing to get right. I have occasionally written some that I've never shown anyone because I like to read poetry and I'm not satisfied to write it the way I write it. And I suppose because of that, I have a real admiration for anyone who writes poetry well. And that's why I decided also, I suppose, that why the Aspern Papers really appealed to me, because it's about someone who wants to write a biography of a famous poet. And in this case, Marianne Rasmussen, the poet in the novel, is not famous at all. In this, my narrator thinks that if she writes this fabulous biography, she can make Marianne Rasmussen famous and save her for the ages, and her beautiful poetry won't be lost, because of course we know very well that there are a whole bunch of wonderful poets out in the world whose work isn't going to last because nobody ever finds out much about it, or they get little chapbooks published here and there and don't make any money, can't make a living, and aren't known, and their work might just sink into oblivion. And that is, of course, the excuse my narrator gives for all the bad behavior.
Saving.
Yeah, saving poets, that's worthy ambition, really.
Well, I think we're done. So come up and buy some books.
Thank you everyone so much for coming, and please do buy a book, and you're welcome to get it signed before you buy it. Just remember to stop by the cash desk on the way out, please, and thank you.